Hi, my name's Ian, and welcome back to my channel, and this is another one of those impromptu review things. Now, you may have seen this in some of the character generation type examples and so on, where I'm throwing dice around, and you know it's a dice tray, and it's one of those neat little popper fold-up ones that just rolls flat. But, logo in the middle. Some of you may not know what that logo is, and so this impromptu review is going to be covering the game that logo is associated with, and it is a game called The Black Hack. Now, what is The Black Hack? Well, it is an OSR role-playing game. Now, for me, the OSR movement was a bit odd. Or is a bit odd. I mean, it's still going, obviously, but the whole point of it, for me, was the reinstatement or the re-support enthusiasts for the older role-playing games, bringing back support for them. And that's fine. You know, we had a period where, you know, through second and third editions or whatever, when maybe what we understood from the olden days, as what a role-playing game was, or what our particular style of swords and sorcery, fantasy role-playing was falling away a bit, and a lot of the games that were then coming out were very much more themed, very much more story driven, very much more mechanical in terms of game rules and specifics and options and all this kind of stuff. So you ended up moving away from character generation or character creation into character building, and it started to feel a bit more like a computer role-playing game than sitting around a table throwing dice at each other. So for me, what the OSR represented was just a reiteration of those halcyon games, days of role-playing games, where it was all about sitting around a table throwing dice at each other and letting stories unfold, rather than setting stories down and having people play through them, where game masters, DMs, whatever you want to call them, were a bit more adept at making things up on the fly, improvising things, where statistics were simple enough that you could just make them up in your head as you were going along, rather than having to spend a bit of a while getting the game balance right. Game balance is a bit of a dirty word in my mind. Everything does not have to be equal, except in games of chess. Anyway, so the Black Hack belongs to that sort of family of games, of OSR games. Now, the OSR for me started to lose traction in two ways. One, in which most of the games that belong to the OSR movement are effectively just reiterations of older games. So there are a number of games that reproduce white box D&D, there are a number of games that reproduce basic D&D, there are a number of games that reproduce Holmes D&D, first edition D&D, second edition D&D. So it's with Wizards of the Coast making all of those older editions of Dungeons and Dragons available again, I think that sort of diminished the traction a bit. You know, if you want to play basic D&D, then it's there, it's available. You can go and get a copy of the original books. Okay, a new copy of the original books, you know, whatever you want to call it, most of them print on demand, or however, and play the original game. You don't have to go and hunt through eBay or second-hand shops to do it. So the point of having those, I think, in a lot of cases, it's it just having a like a cover version or a tribute act of those older games. Some of the games, however, reiterated games that were still being published or printed or made available throughout. So there was a period, for example, where you couldn't get basic D&D except by hunting through second-hand shops. So and a under the D20 license or Open Gaming license or what have you, an iteration of basic D&D, whatever you want to call it, was worthwhile because it meant that people had resources that they could call upon. If you were playing that game around your table, people didn't have to hunt down the original books, and there they had it. They had a version that was compatible with it, that was all glossy and maybe a few bits and pieces that has improved. It's fine. It's where the OSR, the OGL, was then being used to reproduce games that were still being made available throughout that period. There are a couple that I could mention, but I'm not going to. But just to hint at what I mean, it's like, why produce an OGL version of Traveller when Traveller is still very much still is made available in various forms? Why produce an OGL version of Rollmaster or Harp when those games are still very much available? Why produce an OGL version of RuneQuest when that game is very much still available? For me, that undermines the position of those companies that are still trying. Small companies. I mean, if you compare back to Wizards of the Coast, the juggernaut that is Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons, if you compare these other companies like Far Future Enterprises, like Chaosium, and so on, they are nowhere near the size of Wizards and Hasbro. So to me, producing a OGL game based on their works that they have still kept in print is somewhat insulting to the original publishers and the original authors. Not all the time. I mean, the original authors aren't necessarily, with Iron Crown, for example, not really many of the original authors are left or have anything to do with the company. But certainly with Far Future Enterprises, Mark Miller still runs that. So anyway, rant over. Let's get on to this. So one of the good things about the OGL was those companies that went down a line of, let's take the spirit of the role-playing games from yesteryear, and let's go and make things different. So although this game, the Black Hack, is based in the OSR, and it does draw upon elements of Dungeons and Dragons, the earliest versions of Dungeons and Dragons, and so it is referencing back to the OGL. It tries to do something a bit different. So this is not an iteration or a clone or retro clone or anything like that of one of those original games. What it is a game that uses elements and is based on older versions of D&D, but forms itself. It brings new ideas to the table. It doesn't just copy what has been before. It goes and creates a new game, and that's what I like to see. It's innovation. If you're going to go down and pick up these old bases, use them as a foundation, add some innovation in there. Don't just go, well, I'm going to write my own version of basic Dungeons and Dragons, and here you go. Because, yeah, it's not very innovative, and I don't know. Anyway, I'm not a fan of that kind of thing. Right, so anyway, so Black Hack, this is what it is. This is a Kickstarter version of the rulebook, and we've got in here spellbooks, and we've got in here, oh, what's that? A Kickstarter thing about that. Some postcards with stuff, and a card for Square Hex. I'll come on to that in a second. This is the rulebook that you will likely get, and then some other odds and sods in here. Let's just open the book. Right. I'll come to this in a second. Alright, so let's set that out of the way. Rules first, shall we? Rules first. These books are pretty much identical, apart from one is a Kickstarter special and one is the retail version, if you like. So this is a Kickstarter exclusive edition, first 300 copies, and this is the bog standard rulebook. Alright. They're both kind of pretty identical, to be honest. Well, they are identical, other than the fly sheet. Alright, so I'll set the Kickstarter copy aside and we'll go through the rulebook. So, what is it? Well, yes, it's a D20 based game. Checks are dead easy. So the core of it is roll a D20 under target numbers, and your target numbers are based on attributes. So an attribute test is, if you're going to make an attribute test against your strength, you roll a 20-sided dice and it's got to be under your strength. Right? Easy job. If it's equal to or over, you failed. Advantage and disadvantage are same concept as in 5th edition D&D, in the fact that you roll 2 dice to make your checks. In this case, they're saying if it's advantage, the player chooses which dice to use, and if it's at disadvantage, then the games master chooses. So rather than the default, if it's an advantage, you choose the highest. If it's a disadvantage, you choose the lowest. The GM may have other information to go by. Okay, another thing there's like turns, time, and so on. A lot of things like time, distance, and everything else are abstracted down. So instead of things like in D&D you have rounds and so on, and it equates those back to periods of time, or actual periods of time. In this you've got moments and minutes, and then it goes on to hours and days and so on. And in distance you'll have, there you go, distances you have close, nearby, far away and distant. Now for using on a map or miniatures or anything else, there is for the close combat side of things, there is a rough equivalent of here. So close is a square, 5 feet, nearby 30 feet or 6 squares, far away 60 feet, 12 squares, distant beyond 60 feet, beyond 12 squares. For the wilderness stuff, that is a similar kind of set out. You have close, nearby, far away and distant, but translated onto a wilderness type of form. You have this kind of affair where you've got a little hex flower, and it's very good for well, hex crawling is a lot of this book is given up to sort of random tables of building things. There are all of these, room generators, entrance generators, hazards, and so on. So from a hex crawling type of concept, it's really good for doing that. Settlement generator, or all that. So a lot of this stuff is about rolling random things, right? If we get to the character generation stuff, right? So the character generation is pretty much that, and then most of the rest of it is about running the game and random generators for it and so on. Okay, so a lot of it is abstract, like I said. So time is abstracted, movement is abstracted. hit points, hit dice, all this kind of stuff. Your hit dice directly correlates to your level, so you don't. When you go up a level, you gain another hit dice. It's the same as D&D in that regard, except that there is a direct correlation between level and hit dice. In some characters, in different versions of D&D, you could have hit dice that were higher than your level. Then your hit points is basically same as thing. Your hit points reduce as you get damaged. Right. Okay. So attack and defend. So you attack using your attributes. So with melee weapons, it's a strength attribute check. With ranged weapons, it's a dexterity attribute check. They determine whether you hit or not. So after that, you get to defend. So if someone goes to attack, you take an attack action, you go to attack. If someone then, if you hit them, then they get to defend against you. So defending with swords and axes, defending with bows and throws. So if you, where we got to defend, to avoid the damage, you must succeed an attribute test. So to attack, you make an attribute test, and then to defend, you make an attribute test. It says here, the GM will determine what test to use for attacking using the guidelines spell. Well, basically, if you're defending with melee, or defending with throwing weapons or something, so it's that usual split between strength for melee, handheld stuff, and dexterity for range stuff. Then, after you've determined whether actually something's gone through, so if you fail to defend, then you have a pool of dice, which is based on the armour that you are wearing. So each character wears a pool of armour dice. There you go. So the pool is equal to the armour value of the armour. So if you've got something, leather has an armour value of 2, so therefore you have 2 armour dice. So if you do, if a successful attack comes in and you fail to have a defence against that, then you can then choose to remove one of your armour dice to ignore, if you've got any left, to ignore that damage completely. A character fails to defend or takes damage, you can take an armour die out of the pool and put it to one side. That armour dice is broken, right? Armour dice that have been broken cannot be used to ignore further damage. There we go. So after you've had a rest, players with broken armour dice, you can try and fix it. If you roll above the armour's value, then the die is no longer broken. It's fixed. It's fine. If you roll on or below the armour, then the armour dice is broken permanently until it's repaired, and then you've got to go and pay for repairs and so on. So in this way, your armour prevents damage. It's a direct correlation. So instead of your armour, like in traditional Dungeons & Dragons, your armour seeing whether you get hit or not, in this case, your armour blocks damage until such time as it is too knackered to block any more damage. So your armour doesn't contribute to the fact whether you're hit or not, your armour contributes to the fact of you being damaged or not. Which it is the same way in some games. RuneQuest and Rollmaster, for example, contribute to the damage inflicted according to what armour you're wearing, rather than how easy or not it is to hit you. So it's pretty good. It's a really simple mechanic. I mean, that's pretty much all of the combat that you've got. There's some bits on critical hits, for example. So where we got to attack is a natural 1. Remember, we're rolling low because we're rolling under target numbers to be successful. So it's not a natural 20 as a crit. In this case, it's a natural 1 as a crit. Or if the roll to defend is a natural 20, i.e. big failure, the damage dealt is doubled. So back to the earliest days of introductions of critical hits in, if you get a natural, then it's double damage. And then there's some bits and pieces, ongoing damage, which is damage every round. Out of action stuff, if you kill over. The character is taken out of action, you can no longer do anything. If you receive aid or the danger passes, then the character must roll on the table below to see what actually happens to them. And there's things like, you're knocked out, your head's been knackered, you've got some broken bones, you're nothing, badly disfigured, badly maimed, or you're dead. Right, so there we go. And there's also, you know, damage location. So this is the first of the drop tables, right? Drop tables are all the way through this these rules, and they're just nice sort of kind of ways of dealing things. In this case, you go and drop some dice onto the page, and you see what happens. So you drop a dice on the page, and you see where the dice lands, and then read the table. So if you drop the dice on the page and it lands up in this area, then it's an arm hit, and so therefore you roll the damage location, and what happens to the arm. And we've got, you know, shattered knuckles, finger broken, down to broken arm, bicep explodes, oh, that's pleasant, mangled stump, that's also unpleasant, and red fountain. You know, if you've ever watched any of those wonderful old B movies where something gets lopped off and several gallons of blood seem to come out in a geyser. Right. This is a nice way of doing experience points. One of the things I've pretty much done away with in those games that use experience points that I play. I tend to do it by milestone, because adding up experience points and dividing them out and so on is just an unnecessary piece of maths that amounts to a similar thing. You know, if you are in modern iterations of D&D, there are recommendations of how many encounters and so on should comprise a block of experience to increase a level, and an expected rate of level improvement and so on. If you're doing it that way, then why are you using points at all? It doesn't make any sense. If you are imposing an expected rate of level rise, and then you're still making maths in there for experience points earned, I think it's a little bit pointless. So I've done away with that for quite some time now. The way the Black Hack does it is by actually gathering experiences. Not experience points, but actual experiences. So some of the examples they've got here are defeating a powerful named enemy, discovering an entrance or a deeper level of the dungeon, discovering a magical artifact, completing a quest, overcoming or surviving a deadly and powerful threat, or failing so spectacularly in some dramatic fashion that everyone around the table agrees that it should count towards being an experience. Right, so these is not a point-based stuff, it's actual things that happen that you can write down and say, this is actually something that's happened. Right, cool. So once you've gained enough experiences, in this case is a number of experiences equal to the level that you currently are. So if you're second level and you want to go to level 3, you have to have 2 experiences, right? And so when it gets to a point where you can all sit down and share your experiences properly, which is, you know, this sharing experiences bit, which is basically you're sitting down, having a beer, reiterating what's happened, and you know, just learning from it or whatever. You go off and you carouse and you go and have a drink and you go and sit around the table as players, reiterating the experiences that you've scribbled down as being counting towards your level gain. And then you roll to see what's actually happened. And some of them are add to your character's background. So it might be you've got I don't know where you got. It's a real story. Your background gets changed, or secrets revealed. You gain another background to add to your character. So I think this is a really good way of doing it. It adds to the narrative element of the game, and takes the maths away from, oh well, I've gained so many points, so therefore. Right, so rules, we've just gone out. The typical sort of rules you've got in here, you know, things like resting up, sorting your resources out. Resources are described as usage dice. So your usage dice is, if you're going to use something, then you go and roll, and if you roll, it says when you roll a 1 or a 2, well, you got to. When your item is used, its usage die is rolled. If the result is 1 or 2, then the usage die is downgraded to the next smallest die, right? So here we've got, if you start with a usage die of d20, if something might have that. It could be something like a bag of a large number of caltrops or something could have a usage die of 20. It'd be something small and not likely to run out anytime soon. So if you roll a 1 or 2, then your usage die for that particular item goes down to d12. Roll a 1 or 2 on that, and so on it goes to. So if you roll if it goes down to a d4 in the usage die, roll a 1 to 4 on a d4, then it's run out, and that's it. You've got nothing left. The beauty of this is you don't have to actually cross off individual arrows or caltrops or whatever it is you're using. You just have to note what usage die you're currently on. Okay, so resting up, healing, all the usual things that are going through, backgrounds and stuff. So your player backgrounds can actually gain advantage to attributes tests if they tie in with that. Your inventory, character can happily carry any number of items up to or equal their strength, so you don't have to calculate pounds or anything like that. It's just the number of items that you've got scribbled on your character sheet is direct on there. And then spells. Spells is quite nice as well. So it does have memorization, so it does drop in a little bit to the traditional Vancian view of Dungeons and Dragons. Excuse me. But the way this works, you don't necessarily forget the spell once you cast it. So once you cast a spell, you make an attribute test, either intelligence or wisdom, depending on what type of spellcast you're at. Add the spell's level to the roll. So remember, an add to the roll is a penalty in effect, because we're trying to roll under attributes all the time for our checks. So if you're just to cast a first level spell, you're a wizard, you make an intelligence attribute test. If it's a first level spell, you add 1 to that roll. If you'd already cast the spell, so if you've already used it, then that attribute test is made with disadvantage. So you're more likely to forget a spell if you've already used it this session. And then if the attribute check fails, then you've forgotten it. So it doesn't make spells. It's not like you've got spell slots and fire and forget stuff and all of that kind of thing. And so it breaks the Vancian mold a little bit, but it still sort of has it. It's like you know how to cast these spells. You can cast spells up to your level, up to equal to your level, the spell level equal to your level. And after you cast a spell, you make an attribute test to see if you've forgotten it for that session. All right. And then we've got to create a character. So here we go. Familiar, strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. Yeah, well, there you go. They're all 3d6 in exactly the same. There's some interesting way of doing it. So you've got take 3d6 and roll them, add them together, standard. But none of this like 4d6 and drop lowers or anything like that. It's just a straight roll 3d6. Then it's got this. If you roll a 14 or more for one of the characteristics, and you roll them in order, by the way, by the book, you roll them in order. If you roll a 14 or higher, you don't roll for the next attribute. Instead, you make it a 7, and then you go on to the next attribute after that. Okay, so then, after you've finished doing that, you can swap the values of 2 attributes around. So if you've rolled high for wisdom, but you want to play a fighter, you might want to swap strength with wisdom. If you get the highest value in the right place. And then choose a class. There are 4 classes in here. There are other books and things. There are expansions that the Black Hack is wide open for people manipulating it and adding new bits and pieces on it. And there are books of new classes and races as classes and all sorts. But this basically just sticks to your bog standard, although in very early days you only had warrior, cleric and wizard. But here we go. We've got warrior, thief, cleric and wizard. Each one of those is relatively easy. Create a background up. Then you've got some descriptions on how to make a good background. And then we're on to the class descriptions themselves. So there's a basic character sheet for specific to warriors. Then you've got things like, so your starting hit points, 1d4 plus 6, you're always going to start with 7 or more. Starting hit dice, 1d8, so you've got a d8, that's more like along line with the basic and original game, rather than the d10 of advanced. So your starting hit points are 1d4 plus 6. Your hit dice as you go is 1d8, and you get 1d8 every level from that. You can use any weapons, and your attack damage, see Dealer of Death. So Dealer of Death is going through there. Equipment, it gives you a couple of options for equipment. You get a war trophy, and then you get some special abilities. So in this case, self-reliant. When rolling a broken armor dice, if you remember back to your armor dice pool that takes off, you can re-roll a result of 1. So if you are trying to fix your armor and you get a 1, you can re-roll it, so there's more chance that you can actually repair a broken armor die. Shield bash, when you're attacked in melee, and if you're holding a shield and your roll to defend is 1 to 5, so you've rolled low on your on your defense attribute check, then effectively what it's saying is that that as well as defending, you've managed to punch the guy in the face with a shield. So you get your attacker then takes damage equal to your level, right? So they've attacked you, you've defended back, you've got a shield in your hand, so as part of a really good defense roll, you get to deal some damage straight back to them. And then Dealer of Death. Warrior has a pool of damage dice, of 6-sided dice, equal to their hit dice or their level. So when making an attack, you can distribute any number of the damage dice amongst any number of nearby targets. So nearby, if you remember that in the abstract bit, nearby is up to 30 feet away, so 6 squares away. So that's quite a broad range that you've got. For each target the player assigned a damage dice, the player must come up with an exciting and bespoke narration for the attack. So again, this ties into the sort of narrative thing. You've got to describe what you're doing. It's less mechanical. So whereas, let's say, 3rd edition D&D, or even 3rd, 4th and 5th D&D, those, you have to be very precise in the situational modifiers that you're building up in order to create an attack. Your buffs, your penalties, everything else goes and adds to your D20 attack roll. What this is doing here is that I want to do this. I've got this pool. I want to do this, and this is why it's going to work. So your narration has to be in place rather than just adding numbers up. Make an attribute check for each of the dice, and if so, the dice is hurts the foe. And then the pool of damage dice resets at the start of your turn. So every single turn, the warrior has got this pool of dice to go and deal out death. And then here we go. At the end of it, when you get a new level, you share a number of experiences, as we already explained. And then you roll a 20-sided dice for each attribute. If you roll over it, then it goes up 1 point. This is the higher your attributes are, the less likely they are to improve, but low attributes are more likely to improve. And then you get an extra roll for one attribute of your choice. Then you gain a D8 hit dice, and you roll that with advantage. So you roll 2 dice, and then you get to choose which one you take. And then you gain a damage dice, as we've described in the Dealer of Death. So that's Warrior. And then the Thief, similar kind of layout. You've got some stuff. You have a lucky charm. This you start with 1d6 plus 2. Your hit dice is 1d6, which is up from the original. Then choice of equipment, roguish talents. You roll an attribute test without advantage when you perform any of those kind of stuff, which tie in with the thief abilities from older games. Nimble expertise, roll advantage when testing dexterity. When avoiding damage or effects from traps and magical devices. That sort of ties in with the thief's saving throws, or the what was it called? What was the ability called in 3rd edition where they could avoid trap damage? Damn it, can't remember. Never mind, it will come to me after finishing this video, and I'll put a comment on it or I'll just bloody look it up. Right, sneak attack, obviously backstabbing stuff. If you've moved silently to get behind a creature and they are unaware of the thief's presence, the thief may make an attack and automatically hits and deals 2d6 plus the thief's level in damage. There we go. Deep and Murky Past is another one. At the start of the gaming session, roll 1d10. If the result is below your current level, you can customize or entirely change your background on a session-by-session basis. And then a dagger for every occasion. Regardless of what the thief is carrying, they can always produce a small throwing knife from somewhere about their person, and then gaining a new level. You've got, this. So with the fighter, you get you get to choose which attribute you roll for in extra. For a thief, you have to choose between dexterity or wisdom. Right. Then a cleric, similar kind of stuff. Banish undead stuff. So your turning undead kind of thing. Divine Fortification allows you to resist poison or being paralyzed. Memorizing prayers. Prayers are cleric spells. Invoking prayers. And then gain a new level. You choose either strength or wisdom, which is in tying with a warrior priest. And then wizards, obviously, there we go. We got your starting hit points and hit dice, or 1d4, it's low as usual. Starting equipment and so on. Arcane Fortune, if you roll a 1 for your starting hit points, you can generate a random magical item. So if you start the game with low hit points, you get a natty little random magical item to help you on your way. Memorizing spells and casting spells, as we discussed, they cast spells rather than prayers, and then gaining a new level, they gain some more stuff. Right? In this case, they must choose between intelligence or wisdom for their extra attribute raising roll. List of spells, as you can see, very small spell lists. Right? There's no problem with creating more spells, but they are and each one of these lines pretty much gives you everything that you need to know about it. There are these two little books, which give you all of the spells that are in the rule book. A little bit of a summary on casting spells, but then you've got, this is all you need for a spell. So, Magic Missile, for example. Magic Missile. A far away or distant target takes 1d6 points of damage for each of the spellcaster's levels. That's it. That's all you need. So there's none of the detailed bits and pieces for that you have with current editions, where you need to know what creature type is what to determine this, that, and the other, and so on. Like this is the thing for that usage die roll that was going on about earlier for determining whether you run out of arrows or something. Can apply to spells as well, so it's no real ticking off of that. So light, for example, creates a dim light from a nearby spot or an object that lasts for UD8 minutes. Now UD8 means every turn you roll a D8, and if it comes up a 1 or 2, then it will go down to a D6. If it's not, then you carry on with the D8. If the D6, if that comes up a 1 or 2, then it goes down to a D4, and if that D4 comes up 1 or 2 later on, then that's it, the spell has ended. So usage dice work for spell durations as well. Alright, so 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, all the way up to 10th level. 10th level you've got Powered Kill, Level Train, Time Stop, Limited Wish. 9th level Conjure Demons, all this kind of stuff, right? And then there's space for new spells and excuse me, new spells and so on at the back, right? And there's a similar prayers. It's a similar kind of book with just 4 stuff with cleric spells in it. So they're all handy for in-play references. But that describes all the base spells in the game. And if you consider D&D, there are books upon books upon books of spells. I mean, for 5th edition, not only is the stuff from the core books, but stuff like this, which has got even more spells. So if you take the entirety of the 5th edition output, not from wizards and third parties and everything else, the number of spells, there's no way in hell you're ever going to get used. I mean, how many magic... Right, your magic users, your wizards, whatever you want to call them, right? How many of those don't go into a dungeon with magic missile? How many of those in the first 4 levels or so? Before 5th, when you start throwing lightning bolts around. How many of those use most of their spell slots? Slinging, sleep, magic missile, web, you know, your common ones. So, you know, having a load of spells is, you know, it's really good. But as soon as you start getting down the dungeon, the number of spells that become useful very much narrows. And this is what this is doing. It's just taking the narrow selection. Right, blank character sheet for whatever you want to do with it, really. Right. The rest is DM stuff. So that in there, that describes all the rules and how to create characters, all the core rules that that the player is going to need. And there is something called the Black Booklet, and the Black Booklet is pretty much the those things, those sections of the book that we have just gone over. Got some of the core stuff. There's a few DM bits in there, but most of it is about the core rules, creating characters, and so on. So if you like, this is the player's handbook, and this is the full rule book. Okay, so into the referees. Like I said, with most of the stuff that we're talking about, the DM section is mainly concerned with random generation of stuff, right? So a lot of this is about advice, you know, what you're going to do where, random encounters. This is about equipment, creating equipment lists and so on that will be available. A bit more about the usage die and how to put that into equipment, paying things, hirelings, panic, light, disease, poison, drugs, magic side effects, spells, finding new spells, where they might be found, starting the right. So the inciting incident is something at the start of a game or a game session. So that's your jumping off point for adventure. And then this little thing here is just a aid memoir to improvising games and running them on the fly. And then we've got generators, more generators, another drop table, what's on the corpse, and if you remember back to the box, it's replicated in the bottom of the box. So it is drop a bunch of tables, so drop 1d6 for each hit dice of a creature. 5s and 6s indicate the items that the dice land on. And there's all sorts of stuff in there, you know, poison crackers, sentient tattoo, miniature octopus, brad knuckles, list of names, large IOU, rotting ham. It's so it recalls in Against the Giants with the table of what's in the giant's bag, and then stuff about overland, hex generation, example hex maps. Like a lot of the hex flower stuff for hex crawl gaming. Settlement generator, another drop table. You drop the dice on this, and you've got what buildings are there. I mean, a lot of these also bring to mind the old Judges Guild Wilderlands tables for generating dungeons and towns and things like that. Tavern generator. Underworld adventures, so bits about, you know, what do they do, hidden things, searching for stuff, random encounters, traps, dungeon ambience, all this, you know, more random tables. So now you might think all of this, oh my god, it's like you got to roll random stuff all the time. No, you don't. You can still go and pick an adventure or any module for an old game or anything you like, and use these rules to play it. You can convert on the fly because these rules are so simple. These tables are really there for when you're improvising or as an aid when you're inventing stuff, or even if you are using these rules for solo play and just generating dungeons on the fly for your own little heroes to go and wander down if you're bored on an afternoon. So don't think that what this game is just a massive load of random tables that you have to use all the time. They're not. They're useful things for use when you need them, rather than as and when, as in the focus of the game. Even though a lot of the rule book is made up with them. Right, so a bit of secret doors. Bit of some starter maps for you to go and fill in and populate. There's another drop table for, well, actually this is a 6x6 table, but it's generating room shapes and so on. And then we've got for monsters and creating monsters and playing monsters and attacking. Now the monster statistics, the idea behind monster statistics is not to create massively detailed ecological descriptions of everything with every single stat and everything else. It's like everything in this game, it deals with abstracts more than the detailed view. So you've got some of the characters. Every monster is your starting point for making your own monsters up, or for even converting monsters over from wherever you want them to go through. But you've got what it can do, things to choose from, or attributes to choose from, and then you can go for monsters. There's a good selection of monsters here. So let's go and take elemental. Should we go for an? Let's go for an elemental. Right. So you got 3 kinds of elementals. 3 hit dice, 5 hit dice, and 7 hit dice. So all you need is have a look at all of this. You've got an elemental attack, uses strength, inflicts 5 damage. It's a close attack. It's a destructive attack, so armor dice cannot be broken to ignore this elemental damage, so it goes cut straight through. And then hit dice 5, elemental attack, strength 2, close, 8 damage. Lasting attack. When a creature takes damage from the elemental, they take ongoing damage. We dealt with that, or we briefly covered over that, until a successful Constitution attribute test is made. So they carry on going until they make that contact, carry on taking damage. Greater elemental, 7 hit dice. Primal attack, strength 2 nearby, 10 damage. Damaging presence. Creatures that start their turn close to the elemental take extra damage equal to their level. And then there's some bits of tables. They are chained with crystal bonds, condensed into a gem, hypnotically dancing, rapidly. So there's all sorts of stuff. And you've got, well, stuff basically. The statistics are really, really simple. Floating oculus, what a surprise. It's yet another name for a beholder, because they can't use beholder in books like this because they are IP, protected by IP for D&D, and there's a mind flayer version of them as well. So giants, goblins, gnolls, everything that you would kind of expect. Long dead future man, cool. Pig-faced orcs, oozes, slimes, skeletons, anything that you could possibly want. And there we go, telepathic gastropoid, spiderlings, trollers, toadmen, void spawn vampires, weirdo monster generator, reanimated zombies. Right, there you go. And then some treasures, magic items kind of thing. Another drop table for treasure, and then a sample dungeon, the ruined tower of Gormalong. And then we go, we've got it all sort of filled in. And then finally an appendix which gives you some of the terms used in the book. Okay, so that is pretty much it. So the rules themselves, really rules light, really easy to think of stuff on the fly. The statistics side of it is really simple, so it's not hard to just make stuff up. Spell descriptions, I've shown you those, they are really small. So making spells up is fairly easy. Getting the level right is the hardest trick. You got these little postcards and stuff which gives you some of the summary things to do, but also there is a DM screen for the black hack, and DM screen. So some of the sort of main tables and stuff that come up fairly bit. Summary of rules on there, but you know, they're quite easy to remember. And what else we got? It's a character folder with some blank character sheets in it. There you go. They're just ones that were in the, just copies of the ones that are in the book, all in a folder of holding. Not that we've used any of those. Oh, while I'm at it, will that fit in there? No. Well, they can just stay in the book then. The black book, come on to that. That's just the basic summary of the rules. Like cut down from this. Those two, right. So those two are exactly the same. One is the Kickstarter version and one is the standard version. They are the rules. And this is a classic monster, so it's just a monster manual really. Peter Regan of Square Hex fame. And there we go, we've got ant eggs, giant ants. See what I mean by the statistics for monsters? They don't need to be huge. All they've got really is you've got, let's have a look, where's the bear? Black bear. So we've got, instead of having separate attacks for claw, bite, the monsters just have a single attack that covers everything. So we've got claw, bite, strength, 1 close, 4 damage, and then we've got huggy bear. If a failed defense roll is an odd number, the target takes ongoing damage until they make a successful strength test as an action. So a character, if the bear's got them in a bear hug, they keep taking damage until on their turn they can take an action to take a strength test to break free. And that's all that's needed. That's all that's needed for this game. So obviously in a book like this, with statistics blocks that are so small like this, there are a lot of monsters in this. Absolute ton of monsters. And there are some other monster books. If you look at Drive-Thru RPG, look at the Black Hack. What we're looking at here is the 2nd edition of Black Hack, but there are some there's a bit about shamans and witch doctors and so on, and conversion rules for monsters, and you can pick up anything really. The anything monster, whatever it was called, any monster, in the core rules, it gives you some indication of that as well. But yeah, look on Drive-Thru RPG and you'll find lots and lots and lots of additions to it, including Cthulhu editions, the Blackest Hack, which is covers evil characters and evil. It assumes that the characters are just evil sods doing evil things. What else is there? I can't remember. There's just lots of people that have adapted the Black Hack rules. But this is 2nd edition. 1st edition isn't too different. You can adapt things across. The game is so rules light. It's not hard to do that. Classes, yeah. So there's books of classes. There's books of races. There's lots of different expansions and extensions, and yeah, you can do what you like with it, really. It is, of the OSR set of rules, it's innovative, boils it down. The rules don't get in the way of the narrative. You can do all sorts of things with them. Yeah, a black pencil. I mean, how many absolutely black pencils can you have to, anyway, regardless. And also, you know, the Black Hack dice bag, complete with black dice, where, which one is it? Must be the 6s. Yeah, with the 6s being the Black Hack logo. Right, so everything Black Hack that you might need as a nerd that collects paraphernalia. It goes on, including my favourite dice tray. Anyway, that's kind of Black Hack. There's not really much more I can say about it other than it's just fun. It's just fun to go and have a bash with it and pick it up and play. My favourite among the OSR games that came out, it's not really a retro clone, it's a let's try something a little bit more abstract and different. Take the essence of those old role-playing games, particularly the white box D&D and so on, take the essence of them and boil them down into games that just takes all the pain out of the maths and things like that, and keeping track of arrows on a one-to-one basis, and just making them easier to manage and play. Now, what else was I going to say about? Oh yes, so yeah, so it's actually the Black Hack is produced by, published by my friends at Square Hex. You can see from this, published and distributed by Square Hex. Right. Now, why do I like Square Hex? Well, for a start, Peter Regan, who runs the place, is in what dealings I've had with him, usually by email, is just a thoroughly nice guy. But also, if you are a relatively old school type, as I am, and you like sketching maps out on on old school style of things, then you know how many companies these days produce hex paper, numbered hex paper, on a nice convenient pad of stuff. So if you are a hex crawler and you like scribbling down things like that, and you just want stuff that you can pull up and go, then there's a concept for you, a novel concept, and use that stuff all the time. They also did some limited runs of larger hex sheets, which I absolutely love for my mapping purposes, and some I mean, these are a couple of also nice little bits and pieces. So, little journals for your old gamers, or whatever, your new gamers as well. So these are like DIY modules where you can scribble what you like on the cover. There's also laid out your wilderness map, your spaces to map your dungeons and things. Perfect for the sort of scale that the Black Hack deals with. And these, again, look, just spaces for mapping things out, and these tie very well into just lots of room. Right, so I've got a ton up there that I use for various games and various bits and pieces, and they are a godsend for me and the way I like to run and organise games. And these are useful for any game that you wish to play. I've used these little module things for Call of Cthulhu, and for Dungeons and Dragons, and for the Black Hack, and so on. Right, so Square Hex, brilliant place and very useful. I just thought I'd throw that in there, since the Black Hack is something that they are involved in. And that'll do it for this particular run through, an impromptu review of the Black Hack. My favourite OSR game. There you go. Until next time. I can't remember what's up. What's up next. I'll have to look at my list of things. View over the Minu will probably be next, and I'm not sure which one It might be something D&D, but possibly something science fiction. Don't know. Figure it out when I get there. Anyway, till then, look after yourselves and have a great week, month, weekend, whatever you're doing. Take care.